Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. We're in the second phase of my video series regarding new construction, where I'm walking you step by step through the new construction process so that you can understand as a buyer what to look for when purchasing a new construction house, or if you're a seller, what does it look like to actually sell against a new construction house with your existing house. My name is Jack LaRon. I'm your Nashville area real estate agent. My phone number is right here. Please call or text if you have any questions about buying or selling a house within the Nashville area. That includes Brentwood, Franklin, and Fairview, Tennessee. And I'd be glad to answer any questions and help you with any of the opportunities you have either buying or selling in the area. Now, this video right here, phase one, is where I started with the actual preparation of the lot and took you through the process of getting to an actual foundation with the block that you see behind me. So now that we've gotten the block foundation set in, we're stepping into a really exciting part of the new construction process, and that is the framing. And there's a lot of intricacies that go into framing a house versus building a foundation with blocks that are all the same size. Framing is quite more intricate and complex process and is actually a big chunk of the cost process in building a new construction house. So if you wheeled right here behind me, what we're going to see is what's called the lumber package for this specific house. And so the builder, along with the architect, sent the architecture plans to the building supply company to create the order for the lumber that's required to build the framing for this house, and they just had it delivered. So this house will start framing probably within the next day or two, because the builders don't like to leave the product sitting on the ground because of weather, but more likely because the product starts to walk off. So we're gonna walk through what this lumber package looks like and how they put together at the building supply. So let's go. All right, so we're gonna start here down at this end, okay? So these are the floor joists. They're gonna go in on the block once they get the baseboards around the actual block itself. This is what the foundation of the house is going to start with on the floor joists, okay? Now, if you look, the floor joists are engineered floor joists. So it's basically a piece of plywood particle board. And the reason they call it particle board is all these remnants of board are pressed together and glued, and all the moisture is taken out of it in the kiln drying process. And it's kind of like an eye channel. See the eye? It's kind of an eye beam. So they take these floor joists and they give it to their engineer at the building supply company, and the engineer decides exactly how these are going to be constructed at the building supply company based off of the weight of the house itself. So if you think about the subfloor and the floor joists, it's supporting the first and the second level inside the house, specific to where the kitchen is, which actually has the most weight in the first floor because it's got stone, appliances, utensils, pans, dinnerware, and also has like your pantry full of cans of food. So these are engineered so that your floor doesn't bounce or bow, and the engineer uses a formula to figure out, how many of these do we need, how far apart do they need to be spaced, and how do I need to build them so that they have the correct stiffness to support the actual floor in the house. Now, if we move further down this lumber package, what you'll see next is what's called the subfloor. So once these floor joists go in, these particle board plywood boards, they're about 3/8 of an inch thick, get laid on top of the floor joists and make a flat surface. And typically what they do is they'll actually put some adhesive on the top of the floor joist right here. They'll lay adhesive and then they'll nail that. Now, me personally, when I would build, I would always make sure that the framer actually screwed the subfloor in versus nailing it, because eventually I always felt the nails would actually separate and the subfloor would squeak. So if you've ever been in a squeaky house, either on the first or the second floor, and the floor starts to creak, it's because the subfloor and the nail have pulled away from the floor joist. So when I was building for myself, I put it in the framing contract that the framer had to not only glue the joists on both, the subfloor on both floors, but they had to screw it because that ensured that it would not pull away. Now, if that does happen in your house after the fact, you'd have to pull back whatever flooring is in there, and then you just apply screws in every other spot where the nail's not, so that the subfloor would then be seated back to the floor joist. But that's what that would look like. So you got floor joist first, subfloor second, and then on top of that, you'd have the lumber package, okay? And this to me looks like it's just framing for the bottom floor at this point. They'll bring in the secondary lumber package once they get to the second floor. But this will start framing all the exterior walls and the interior walls. Now, when they get the exterior walls up, they'll put plywood on the outside of the house and cut all the windows and everything out. And that'll be kind of the shell of the house. So you have plywood for the floors and you have plywood surrounding the exterior of the house. And that would be the shell of the house that would wrap in the walls, both on the exterior outside, and then eventually they'll build the interior walls. Now, this is a really unique part here. So these are the roofing truss. Now, if you notice, there's different sort of sizes and modes to the roofing truss. So these roofing truss, if you come around this way, have a lot of angles and a lot of crossbars and a lot of nails and ways to make the joints strong, because this is going to carry the weight of the roof. If you tried to take this lumber and individual boards, like you see here, these 2x4s, and try to build it on site, it would take forever because you have to get precise measurements on these roof trusses. And if one's off, the entire roofing system is off. So what happens at the building supply company, the engineer from the architectural plans that the builder sends in knows exactly how many trusses he needs and all the angles that are in the roof. So if you look over here at this particular house as an example, you see the house has multiple roof lines and angles in the house. There's not a straight line whatsoever from a roof truss to build that roofing system on site. It would take forever and there's no way you get the angles right. So what the builder does is they build that system at their factory for the builder, and that cuts down the time that it takes them to put all that together. And they just put it on a big table. They got kind of a jig is what it's called, and they've got all their measurements laid out, and they build it at the building supply company. They number it so that when they're installing it, they know which number goes where, and they'll bring out a crane and lift these trusses up one by one and make the roof truss system. So this saves a lot of time and a lot of material, and it also ensures that they get accuracy on the roof line for when they're building out the roofing system. So this is what the lumber package looks like to get started. What we're gonna do next is we're gonna walk through a house that's being framed and kind of show you how everything went together, and then what it means to be dried in once you put a house together in the framing aspect. So we'll do that part next, and we'll move into that part of the tour as we move forward. So here we are in the next part of the series, phase 2, doing the framing, okay? So we just talked about the framing package, the floor joist, the subfloor, the ceiling trusses, the roof trusses, and also some of the lumber to make the yard, make the wall. So as you can see, they've got it installed here. So you got the block, and now we've got the exterior walls with this wrap around it. This is a moisture barrier, and again, this is some of that plywood on the outside. But we're gonna walk through the inside and kind of see what this looks like here on the inside. So come on. All right, so we just entered the garage area, and you can see the exterior walls are up, okay? So what we have here, we've got the block, which is the foundation. We've got the base plate. This is pressure treated, so it helps with moisture. We got a moisture barrier here. We've got these 2x4s that usually come in 8-foot lengths, okay? And then we have this squared up onto the base plate. And this is that particle plywood board we're talking about, which is the exterior shell of the wall for the exterior wall. Now, we always talk about these 2x4s inside the wall being 16 inches on center. Let's check to see if that's the case. So right at 16 inches on center. So this will eventually be covered with sheetrock, but you know behind me of these wall studs are 16 inches on center all the way through. And around these windows, they add extra support and bracing to carry the load from the roof down onto the actual foundation. Otherwise, the window would buckle when you cut out this big section. So they add this extra support along here and brace up with the additional 2x4s to make this section stronger, because you're cutting out a massive section of the wall, and you have to carry that load from the header and the windows around this opening to these extra braces here down to the foundation here on the brick. So otherwise it would kind of collapse in and your windows would pinch. So you can see, here's a great example of the floor joists. You can see them all the way through as they were laid down cross section here across the house. Here's the subfloor that we talked about sitting on top of the floor joist, on top of the base plate. on top of the moisture barrier, on top of the block that makes the foundation. And you can see they call it a crawl space because everything in here underneath the floor is actually open space. So you've got the wall here leading up to the roof, and if you see the ceiling, you can see the ceiling truss that we talked about. They installed those with the crane and lifted them up, and you can see they start on this section and go all the way over, and those were the ceiling, the roof truss that we saw out on the ground. And you can see kind of how they put all this together. So block foundation, moisture barrier, base, floor joist, subfloor right here, and then you start framing up the walls, and then make sure you got to carry the load from the roof ceiling all the way down so that it equally carries onto this block right here. Okay, and you can see they put these extra headers here, these beams, which they manufacture at the building supply company. They put two of these together to carry the load across this opening. This is actually the garage door, but the load from the ceiling has to still come down, and then it travels crossways over to the side and carries down onto this. And again, they added extra bracing in here to come down onto this one section of block. So they have to always carry the load of the house down to the ground. And whenever you cut open sections like they did for the windows and for the garage doors, you've got to transfer that load around the opening and down, and then provide extra bracing so that nothing buckles when you're doing this. So let's go check out the interior of the house now. All right, so here we are. Again, exterior wall, interior walls. Okay, so the exterior wall is carrying a lot of the weight of the house, and it created the shell to bind it all together with this particle board on the outside. So that's all exterior wall. You see, these are called the interior walls. And you can see they've already started running some of the plumbing through these walls. But you can see above us the ceiling roof truss. And you can see again, now they're running the roof truss this way, whereas in the garage they ran them that way. But these roof truss were all built at the building supply company. They use a crane and put them up, and they run them all the way down so you can see all the roof truss. So we talked about earlier, they make those at the building supply company because it takes forever to do it out here, and just the amount of waste and everything it would take to do that's intense. This is the subfloor right here that we talked about. You can see the seams, right? They nail on the seams, they glue, right? And then we come over here, you see the exterior plywood here, exterior wall, and then they come start bracing inside of that. And again, headers carrying the load of the roof around the opening in the wall. They've got some of the ventilation going in, so they cut a hole in the roof board up top. They're already running some of the ductwork for the air conditioning. You notice you don't see any electrical lines, so the electrician has not come in here yet and started running all their electrical lines. But we've got some plumbing already run, and then we got some ductwork already run. So this is where going to be the vents are going to come in for the air conditioning and the heat. You can see them up inside what would be the attic up top. And again, here's a return unit right here. So this will be sucking it back in. This is going to be the front porch. So this is a pretty long house. It actually faces west. The sun's setting over there. It would rise over there. This is going to be a porch. They'll fill all this in with gravel, so they don't really care what waste is in here. So they'll fill this up to gravel to about right here, and then they'll pour concrete over the top of that. And again, you see the yellow moisture barrier wrapped in the house. It's called a house wrap. That keeps the moisture going down behind the shingles that are going to be behind here. But I just want you to get a good idea of what it looks like when they frame a house. And you can see the intense amount of boards it takes to frame a house. I mean, all these boards, you know, outside of the truss and the floor joist are all nailed individually according to the blueprint that came from the architect. So they do these all individually, including these. These are just a bunch of 2x4s nailed together. You know, so these aren't done, you know, at the building supply company. They're done on site based off of the load requirements for that wall. comes from the building supply company, like these headers do, to carry the load over these openings. But look how many boards they had to nail together to bring the weight way up top in the ceiling up there, all the way down to the floor here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 2x4s to carry the weight on this side. Because if you look, come through here, oh yeah, all the way up to the roof, it's carrying the weight from the roof down to this header. This header now is carrying the weight down to these boards on this side, down to the floor. If you don't carry the weight from the top to the bottom, your house is gonna buckle. You can see these beams right here, they're probably 12x6s, but they're carrying a lot of weight. You gotta transfer the weight from the top to the bottom to be supported on the foundation. And they put these extra supports in here so that the walls that aren't supported all the way across, they'll start buckling when they're doing the framing. You look at this header right here, they built this on site. And again, they're carrying the weight of this header, it's a door header, all the way down. These look like maybe 12x6s, all the way down. Same here on this header, right? Again, they got the air conditioning ducts going through here. Here's a massive header right here. Oh, check this out. 1, 2, 3, one of those 12x6s. They probably did those at the building supply company. And then they had that weight across this massive opening coming down here, down to the floor. So you always got to transfer the weight. Look at all the cutouts for the windows, how they're transferring the weight over the window header, around the sides and down. Wherever they need extra support, carrying a weight from the roof down, they build that out too. And it's just, it's always amazing how they have to transfer the weight and how they have to modify how many boards they put together to make the weight transfer work. But it's pretty cool to see this process. Again, here's all the subfloor. You can see the nails. Boom, 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 boom. It's even marked where they're supposed to nail. And ideally they used adhesive plus the nails to get the subfloor down, and that prevents it from creaking. But really interesting how this all works. See these ceiling trusses right here? Those aren't angled because it's a flat roof on this section, so they get a little pitch going to the front, but they're not like the angled ones in the back. But pretty interesting. So this is the wrap up sort of the the framing part. What they're going to do next is do the dry in, and when you're dried in, you have all the windows in and you have the doors, the exterior doors in. And when you have the exterior doors in, this one right here, all the windows, and the roof is on, you're called what's dried in. So that actually prevents the weather for the most part from coming in. Now remember, where we've punched through vents through the roof, there's still gonna be water coming in that aspect. But for the most part, you've got the house dried in. I mean, this is a massive space in here. That's crazy, look all the way up. I'm curious to see what this house is gonna look like when it's done. I would imagine it might be a staircase here going up there, but man, if you turn around and look at that, look how massive and open that is up top there. Whew. All right, well, thank you for tuning in. This was phase 2 of the building process. My video for phase 1 is right here. We're gonna get to phase 3, which is the next part of the construction process. Look forward to talking to you on that. But if you have any questions or comments on that, please leave them down below. If you have any questions on buying or selling in the Nashville area, my number is right here. This particular community is in Fairview, Tennessee. I've done a lot of videos on that community and a lot of information about new communities coming online and how to get into these houses. I'm Jack LaRon, your Nashville area real estate agent. Thank you for tuning in.